Well, hello and welcome to the Unofficial Unreal Engine podcast, where we talk about all things Unreal Engine and also adding cognition to Charles Dickens. We're your hosts. My name's Alex, and under me or next to me is
Jacob. Good to be back here. I gotta say though, this is one of your more coherent openings when it comes to your choice of words. So I think people already get an idea what we're going to talk about. But before we do that, make sure you like, rate, subscribe, all of those things. Comment. We get some great feedback on YouTube. I wish we could get more feedback from the other platforms. Maybe that's something we should look into. Or you can send us an email. I don't know if people still do that for podcasts,
I've
but
I've
hey,
totally forgotten what our email is, Jacob.
it would be uepodcast@gmail.com. Feel
I
free.
believe you.
Shoot that over. Maybe you'll email someone else, but the ethos will get it to us. Anyways, we have a special guest with us tonight, Alex.
We do have a special guest. Really excited to welcome Yu-Jun Yeh to the podcast, who I have known for a few years. There's lots and lots of things I would like to say about her, but let's start by having her introduce herself. Welcome, June.
Hi. Hi everyone. My name is Yu-Jun Yeh, but I usually go by just June. And yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much. And I'm already hinting what I'm going to share with. Yeah. So
June, we always need to be very careful for our audio listeners who sometimes feel left out. So why don't you tell everyone what's behind you?
So yeah, so the thing behind me is our poster for the show that we're going to talk about is Christmas Carol VR.
Yeah.
We've been chatting about this on the podcast. I mean, it seems like things have been going great, and we're going to dive into it. I feel like this is an annual tradition now, is to talk about everything you guys are doing with this, because each year you get to kind of redo it, right? And use the latest tech. So definitely excited to get into that. But before that, we have a little something that we like to do with guests on the podcast. Essentially, it's just a word association. All right. So I'm going to say a word. You're just gonna say the first word that comes to your head. It's no pressure, but we are putting you on the spot. So it goes both ways. So just gonna say a word, first thing that comes to your head. All right.
Okay. Yeah, and still keeping in mind that English is my second language, so
Yeah.
it might come out weird.
The first word that comes to mind, it doesn't need to be in English. Totally fine.
Yeah,
Really?
that's true. That's true.
So I can just speak whatever. Okay.
Whatever you
And we will
want.
have
expand the universe.
Those listeners of our podcast who know the words you're speaking will be so thrilled. It'll be a great Easter egg.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So first word, home.
Linko.
Okay. Work.
Unreal.
Food.
Tofu.
Travel.
Plan.
Okay. Virtual production.
Microphone.
Virtual reality.
Oculus. Oh my god, that's so much like an advertisement.
No.
Oh no.
All right, last one. Unreal Engine.
Because
So
yeah.
we have a few questions as well, and these are open-ended. Do you drink coffee or tea?
Tea.
What kind of tea is your favorite? Or how do you take it?
My favorite is oolong. How do I take it?
Yeah, like the British have a ritual around it. I'm not a tea person, so I don't really know, to be honest. But how do you prepare your tea?
I'm a pretty open-minded tea person. I always drink tea. Well, I can do it very delicate, or I can just throw a tea bag and let it be there for 8 hours, and I will still drink that kind of water. still call it tea.
It's kind of funny. We've had a lot of folks who have, very what's the word I'm looking for? Very kind of religious coffee routines. But I'm with you that, like, there's different coffee for different times and places. You know,
Yeah.
I believe in that.
7-Eleven
Anyways,
coffee.
okay, two more questions, and then we're gonna get on to the meat here. But what's your favorite time of day? Are you a morning person or a night person?
Oh, I like the time before sunset.
Ah, okay. And when was when was the last time you laughed, and what was it that you laughed at?
Um, well, it's a very normal scenario. I just laughed on the meme.
At a meme?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what the meme was?
Yeah, what was the meme?
It's something with a cat.
Classic.
Oh, the one recently I'm really into one series of memes. It's about a cat, and the cat's owner turns this cat into various different kind of animals. Just like, because cat can be any shape, and he just kind of cut
Ah,
it and
yeah,
rotate it a little bit and makes into dinosaurs and penguins and,
yeah.
and
Oh,
stuff.
actually, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I
I know
love it.
exactly what you're talking about. I've seen
I
these
know
on like
someone is going
TikTok,
to say.
on TikTok where they like crops the cat into like a T-Rex.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, like,
I've seen that. That's
oh,
good. That's good. I like those too. All right.
Love it.
Thank you for subjecting yourself to our you know,
We're
to
gathering
our
some
cold
great
open.
insight from all of our guests. We're going to feed it into an AI someday. Something wonderful is going to pop out.
We're gonna know how everyone takes their tea and coffee. It just AI is gonna listen to the first three words you say, and it's gonna say, this person
yeah.
likes it, black or with
I'm going to get a lot of Oculus and tea advertisement
Oh, yeah.
after the
Sure.
show.
All right. Well, Alex, what do we want to get into?
Well, certainly June and I are very excited to give like a proper backstage tour of all the Christmas Carol stuff. Our listeners who have been with us for a while will remember last year we had Ari Tar and Debbie Deer on the podcast, and they got to speak at length about what it was like for them as performers to come in and do this show. And we definitely did have some people after that being like, awesome episode, would love to know more about the technical side and what it's like for the development team to make that happen. So we're going to dive into that with June. We do feel, because it's our last episode of the year, we should cover a little bit of Unreal Engine news. One thing I want to make sure everyone knows is it is the annual holiday sale on the Epic Game Store, where instead of there being one free game every Thursday, there's a free game every day. So pop into your Epic Game Store
Oh,
account, grab those free
I
games.
am. Here I am opening it right now.
Yeah.
That's how motivated I am by that.
And then there
What's
was another lawsuit. We talked a little bit about the Epic versus Apple one, which unfortunately Epic summarily lost. This was about Apple's 30% charge on the App Store and Fortnite getting kicked off, and Epic saying, hey, it's ridiculous to take a 30% cut of everything. Credit cards don't do that, et cetera, et cetera. But then they did something similar with Google, and the results were a little different. Tell us about it, Jacob.
Yeah. I'm gonna do my best to summarize some of the details here, but definitely recommend you kind of do some research on your own to look through it. There's a lot of information here. For those who kind of don't know the backstory on this, maybe I don't know. I want to say 2 years, 3 years ago now, Apple or getting ahead of myself, Tim Sweeney. Uh, I think the Tim got me to Apple in some weird association. Um, but about 2 or 3 years ago, Tim Sweeney, said that they were going to go all out to fight lawsuits against tech companies who were abusing marketplace privileges. The justification for this was, well, I think there was an external justification and an internal one. What was said is that um, Google and Apple have unfair monopolies over the distribution of applications on their devices, which I think is probably generally true. The kind of backstory to it, though, was that Fortnite at the time, you buy V-Bucks on Fortnite on PC, you're paying dollars directly to Epic. Now, if you buy those same V-Bucks on an iPhone, because Apple's going to come in and take I don't know what it is on Apple devices. I think it's like 20%.
I think it's
I wanna say.
30%.
Maybe 30% charge on any transaction that happens on an Apple device, essentially, which is pretty wild, to be honest. And so essentially what Apple does is that if you have an application that does any sort of microtransaction, such as like buying V-Bucks or purchasing a subscription through an application, you can't link to an external site to make the purchase. You can't use a different payment processor. So like you can't have an app approved on the Apple App Store without using Apple's payment processor and accepting the fees. And so what that meant is that Epic's just losing dollars for every user who goes to an iPhone to buy V-Bucks instead of goes to their PC. And rightfully, they were a little upset about that. And whether or not you want to believe the larger argument about the ethics of monopolies in this kind of industry, I think you can see that this doesn't make sense, right? So Epic announced that they were going to go all out and sue Apple, and they started a big campaign. It was called Free Fortnite, and they kind of won, they kind of lost. It was pretty much a 50-50 settlement where they said, yeah, I mean, Apple might not be the best, but like they're not acting explicitly against the rule of the law, I guess, was more or less the conclusion of that. Nothing really came out. Now, at that time, there was an ongoing lawsuit with Google for the same thing. They sued both of them around the same time. And the Google lawsuit just outright failed at that time, is my understanding. And more recently, they renewed or they appealed the lawsuit, or there was something to that extent, where they filed, I think it was a new filing. And so recently they were in court, and a court ruled in favor of Epic that Google does have a monopoly on App Store on Android devices that is leveraging unfairly in a number of cases. Now, this is recent, and this is a good thing. The fact that a court ruled that, yes, Google has unfair advantages over consumers on their platform, that's a good thing. Now, apparently at the same time, and I'm trying my best to extract this information from a few articles, so, bear with me if I get this wrong. But at the same time, Epic had additional, lawsuits. Sorry, Google had additional lawsuits to this extent that they were handling in courts. And so they said multiple state attorney generals essentially decided that because there were so many cases in the pipeline, because this court ruled in favor of Epic and said, yes, you're fighting, or this is unfair monopoly, Google just decided to go ahead and settle all of these cases with the state attorney generals. And the outcome of that was that Google agreed to pay $700 million to, I believe, like to the state, I want to say. It doesn't actually say where they're paying the $700 million. I guess it doesn't really matter for Google. This is like nothing dollars for Google. I mean, look, it's a lot of money, but it's not gonna break the bank for Google. There's a few other cases in here where supposedly this says that they're going to pay $629 million to consumers that might have overpaid for apps that had reasonable alternatives. And then there's a whole lot of updates that Google settled to make to the App Store to the effect of, kind of resolving this issue. Now, so I'll read you a few examples here. There's like 10 of these. For 7 years, Google will continue to technically enable Android to allow the installation of third-party apps on mobile devices through means other than Google Play, is an example. For 5 years, Google won't make developers offer their best prices to customers who pick Google Play and Google Play billing, and they're going to allow people to add additional billing types. Now, when you read through this, it's like, well, there's a lot here. They all have expiration dates, is I guess the biggest takeaway, is that like Google agreed to do this for like 5 years in the US only, by the way. Like, so if you're in Europe, well, actually Europe kind of has way stronger laws about this, and you can argue all day about EU verdicts to this extent. But in the US, essentially they said for 4 to 5 years they'll agree to like play nice, essentially. They pay basically no money for Google. Like this is not a big enough settlement. And so like essentially what they're doing is kind of delaying this verdict for another 5 to 6 years before they have to make any permanent changes to the platform or really do anything substantial. Like they'll offer quote unquote alternatives. We don't really know what that means. Now, I think if you're looking at this, it's still a good outcome because it sets a precedent for courts ruling on cases like this. However, was this like the knockout blow to Google's monopoly, quote unquote? No, definitely not. Yeah, I don't think anyone would see it that way. But hopefully, we see some meaningful change here. Doesn't solve, the Apple App Store, of course. But progress is progress. So that's how I would prefer to take it. So any thoughts here, Alex? I just monologued as I do on this podcast, but
no, that sounds pretty much like the shape of it to me. I really hope this is a good precedent, not just for Apple, but it's always seemed ridiculous to me that 30% is the cut that is so standard. It was also very strange when Mark Zuckerberg a couple of years ago was talking about the Meta App Store as like this beacon of hope where things were going to be different, and he was specifically bad-mouthing like Apple's 30% cut without acknowledging the fact that Meta does exactly the same thing. And there have been some really, really good podcasts with people like Kent Baya, Voices of VR, with folks like Six, and there's one going on right now with Andre Elijah, and developers who have talked about how hard it is to make a profit, specifically with Meta's model, because VR is already a very difficult industry to make a profit with. Someone else would be like, I'm blanking on his name, but Big Screen Beyond, where something like that, where you're licensing movies to play in VR, there's already like a licensing fee for that. So then 30% on top of that, you're losing a lot of money. And then if a company like Meta, for example, swoops in and does their own first party solution where they're like, we're going to offer movies, or we're going to offer a fitness app, or we're going to offer, Supernatural, and make it so that all other health apps are it's much harder for them to compete on the store because the first party apps don't need to have that 30% cut and the other ones do. It's just very anti-competitive. It makes it very hard for a new company to kind of rise up and challenge anything that isn't already being done internally. So anything that starts to cut down on that 30% cut, I think, is good for the world and the industry and competition and startups. But we'll see where this goes. Yeah.
One of these is wild. Like the last one I mentioned, Google agrees for 5 years to not make developers offer their best prices to consumers who choose Google Play. Is like the most classic strong arming tactic ever. Like, you can use Google Play as long as, it's the best price on Google Play, because if you put it anywhere else, you can't use Google Play. Like that's
and Amazon's famous for that too. Like there's a lot of times where Amazon won't let you list physical products at a lower price somewhere else if you're listing it on Amazon as well. Like it's very strong arm. June, do you have any thoughts on all this craziness?
Not really. I mean, it feels like it's a bigger problem with the whole system. If there is like a better or a healthier system that can exist, it basically will benefit both sides, right? It's not just like the marketing or the platform side will lose if they make a healthier system. It's not like the platform is the only person that I mean, more content basically benefits the platform. So it should be like a win-win situation to have a healthier and more that makes sense.
You would think,
And June, of course, June's from Taiwan, where HTC is headquartered, and like I think a lot of us feel like we'd love to see HTC as already an underdog, able to really come up and challenge companies like Meta. They definitely don't have the same number of resources, and there's a lot of extra challenges they have there. And by the way, June, I'm curious, would you say Taiwan in general is very supportive or excited about HTC as a company? How do you think that compares to the perspective in the US?
Oh, I think no. Actually, I think, but it's largely not just not. It's not about the company itself. It's more about the political situation in Taiwan, and HTC's background is more like linked to a sensitive political
Gotcha.
status
Yeah.
and things. So yeah, people in Taiwan with certain political preferences will either love or hate the company based on that, not based on their product or any of their servers.
Interesting. Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Well, on a lighter note, should we talk about some Christmas Carol?
Wow, that was a rough transition there. I'm sorry. Look,
Smooth.
I would have let you have it, but man, you really kind of went all the way on that.
Not one of my better segues for sure.
but hey, let's talk about Christmas.
Cool. All right. So just to set this up a little bit, and actually, you know what? I'm really tempted because Zoom just gave me a little pop-up that was like, do you want to go live on YouTube with this? And it's like, well, we could, but I have no idea what would happen. So I'm not going to at the moment. Maybe in the middle I'll do it, and I'm not going to tell anyone we're live on YouTube, but it'll at the very least be like a backup recording. Anyways, so let's talk a little bit first about June's involvement in the project, because she wasn't just involved for the 2023 production, not just the 2022 production. June has been a part of this since the very beginning. We met in May of 2021. I grabbed her fresh out of architecture school. I'm guessing June probably thought we would mostly be doing architecture projects. And before long, she was being asked to learn Marvelous Designer and do costumes and do motion capture and do all these other things in Unreal. June, do you want to talk a little bit about your time with Christmas Carol over the years?
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's a fun journey for me. Yeah, like right as Alex mentioned, right after I graduated from architecture school, I started to learn how to make closed model in 3D closed modeling. And yeah, I didn't expect that would be my first kind of work experience in the US. But that's pretty interesting. So we started with collaborating with Actors Theater of Louisville. So there will be like traditional theater designers. They design the sets and give the sketch of like the original costume design and everything. And my first job was to just transform it into the digital form and try to make it work on the metahuman skeleton and learn like how to do weight planting and everything. And yeah, and it was the first kind of the most complicated Unreal project I ever participated in. And interestingly, it continues to be the most complicated project I participated every year after that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And June, what are some of the changes that we made this year in particular compared to last year? You know, things like what version of Unreal are we now in, and stuff like that.
I think it's even more, I think it's even easier to say what is the same than what is different. Yeah, we changed from 4.27 to 5.2, and we were still kind of pushing to make it into 5.3, but it's still ongoing. But yeah, that changes everything basically. And also we changed from, so in previous years we were working based on the advanced framework plugin, or like the advanced framework template. And this year we kind of start from scratch. So like the multiplayer system, we're not even using an actual multiplayer session or even any online subsystem. We'll kind of do the replication from scratch based on OSC signal and the WebSocket. Everything is from scratch. We don't have an online subsystem at all. And also, yeah. And also,
we got to pause there because I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off because I got to poke on this a little bit. So why did you do that? And well, here, we'll start at the beginning. What does that mean for the listener or the viewer who doesn't know anything about multiplayer, anything in Unreal? Why did you do that? And, you know, what did it take to get that done?
Yeah, well, there are several reasons, and some of them might not make sense for all the scenarios, but for us, it's kind of all the reasons. One of the problem is that at first we were trying to work it on a cloud computing core weave, and in our version we call it graphical, and just for some reason it's still unknown. But whenever we try to run our project on that cloud computing system, if we are doing a traditional multiplayer session, it just have like a 50 to 70% random crash for whatever reason. But if we do it as a single player, it almost always stable. So I think that's the first biggest issue, just because we couldn't figure out why. And the second is also because when we load from levels to levels, we know that in the traditional multiplayer with the replication system, the host will need to load everything first, and then we will let the client load everything. The client will then like keep up on the host. So basically everything will be slower. But if everyone is running their own single player session, and we just like send a signal from outside of the game to say that, okay, now you are going to go to the next step, things will just go faster. And we kind of, I think also because we are doing multiplayer on our own, so we're very selective of like what are the things we want to replicate and what are the things we don't want. So we can make everyone's experience very customized. Like we have our AI robot, the AI Dickens in our session. We let everyone have their own AI robot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead, Jacob.
No, I was just gonna ask. All right, so if the system you worked out with levels, which seems very interesting, so it's just an event-driven approach, and you're kind of just instructing instances to do these things. Why is it that someone would choose this approach over a standard multiplayer? You know, in a practical, like, why doesn't everyone do this, I guess, is the question.
Oh, because that's very. I mean, there's the standard multiplayer has a lot of benefit. Like, we kind of have to very manually build things up, and you can imagine, like, in a traditional multiplayer scenario, there are a lot of things that are already replicated, like the other players' movement, their transition, their movement, and we can just check that, oh, I want its animation to be replicated, and then it's replicated for everyone. But for us, we need to replicate everything. We need to send out the location and the rotation and the scale. Yeah. And we have to send it to the host instance first, and then we have to write it so the host can send it to everyone. And we also still need to do the check that when they got the event, they will not got the event from themselves. Like, I don't need to replicate my movement to myself again. It's just going to make myself busy. Things like that. So there's still a lot of benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That being said, though, there are definitely some benefits to the OSC method. One thing, for example, is it's very easy to pick anything we want and have it replicate, and we don't have to deal with all the different ways that, you know, multicasting and all that works in Unreal. We can also be very specific about how often we're sending data to everyone, really just by using the event tick of our like client host OSC system. So, for example, you know, people use Fortnite like as an example of like 100 people. That's kind of like the typical number of people you can get in a shard of the same experience. We could very easily get more than that by very just strategically dialing up or down the event tick of like how often we're getting everyone's information about where they are and which queues are firing and all that, which is kind of interesting. So in theory, we could have like 10,000 people, but maybe the load of that would mean that everyone only sends an update for where they are like once per second, and then we're like lerping between that. So it wouldn't be great for like a first-person shooter where you really do want that split-second kind of latency, but for a live show, a live concert, where maybe the interaction doesn't need to be quite that responsive, that could work. I also want to call out the fact that one thing that's fun about how we do Christmas Carol every year is that we're always building on the projects that we have done that year. So, for example, when June and I both worked on the Orchard Off-Broadway in the summer of last year, that was the first time where we actually started using OSC as part of a live show. And so with that, everyone who came to see the live show was on CoreWeave, Pixel streaming their version of the virtual version of the Orchard Off-Broadway. And that was the first time we realized, like, oh, hey, they don't actually need to be in multiplayer. We can just send this OSC signal to everyone. And as long as they all receive the same signal at the same time, they'll get the cues for when the show starts and when they move from our virtual Baryshnikov Arts Center into the hall. And the cool thing too was that OSC signal, which is very common in live entertainment, was able to do two things. It was able to send a signal to the physical venue as well as the virtual venue. And then after being like, hey, OSC is pretty cool, you can do some, neat kind of multiplayer-esque stuff with it, we kind of took it to the next level for Christmas Carol last year, where we then allowed that to, we replicated our cue board so we could send all the different signals that we wanted from a free application called Touch OSC. So if like the host went down, for example, multiplayer would stop working because we still were using some traditional multiplayer last year. So you'd lose sight of where everyone else was, but we could actually keep the show going by using Touch OSC to continue to send out the cues to everyone of exactly where they should be in the show. And then we went even further with OSC this year. June, what did we do with OSC for our Four Seasons project, which podcast listeners know a little bit about already?
So for Four Seasons, we it's kind of our starting point of trying to use OSC to fake the multiplayer experience. So yeah, we use OSC to send the every other player's headset location and rotation to all the other headsets. So basically, we start to fake other pawn or other players in that, and we also use OSC to send out. It's kind of the same, just send out like the host signals for everyone to go to the next location or show a specific, like show the footprint on the floor so everyone know to go there. Yeah, it's basically like a very simplified version of our Christmas Carol OSC multiplayer system.
Yeah.
Oh, and yeah, a benefit of that is Alex already mentioned it briefly, is that because in a traditional multiplayer session, if the host go down, everyone basically will be kicked out of the session. So, and that is the moment we lose everyone. But in this session, in our current system, if the host crash everyone will be fine, and we can secretly reboot the host, and we can just adjust the host to be at the like the queue or the status we want it to be, and nobody will notice.
That's interesting. So what you're saying is that because the clients are standalone and just receiving events, it just says, hey, I haven't received events, just keeps on going.
Yeah.
You reboot the host and it's able to start firing those events again, and then all of your other instances just catch on and go from there.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting because we are separating our multiplayer signals or into various different little modules. So like our Rococo, our body movement, what is that? The motion capture data is going through a different system called Protocast. So even if the host instance is done, the body animation will continue to go on. And our audio is also not going through the any multiplayer session. It's going through Agora. It's and also a separated audio service. So
which we used for the first time for the Orchard.
Yes, yeah. So we kind of learned from there that that's an option. So we use that to replicate the voice. So so if server goes down, everything else will just continue to happen. And we can buy some time to fix it, and nobody will notice until the next queue. And we just have to fix the host, come back to life, and then go to the next queue. And for everyone else, it will feel very smooth. Just like everyone else was stuck in the air for a moment. But actually, yeah, we don't really care about others that much, so
Well,
it's fine.
but things like Agora could also still keep running. So like this hasn't even
Yeah.
happened yet this year. But if we really needed like one of the actors or anyone to make an announcement, we have like keyboard keys to like unmute yourself, and someone can say like, "Oh, pardon me, ladies and gentlemen, we have a brief technical difficulty. We'll be back in shortly." So we have that ability even if everyone is like disconnected, which is very nice, just for like keeping everyone on the same page and reducing that audience friction as much as possible. Because when we were using traditional multiplayer, if our server crashed and everyone was kicked out, we would just kind of hope they could come back in. And we did actually have a way to do some audio broadcasts as well, using the pixel streaming methods that we had. But it was like, it was so frustrating, particularly because when this project lived in Unreal Engine 4.27, it would take forever. Like the Unreal Editor version of the project would take like 30 minutes to open up, and even the packaged version would take like a few minutes to open, even on our most powerful computers. So it's been really nice being in 5.2 this year, where everything is just much, much, much faster.
Yeah, that's very cool. Okay, so I totally cut you off when you're going through your list of changes because I thought that was an interesting point we need to chat about. But let's keep going. Like, what else changed this year?
Right. Oh, this year, one major change this year is also that we put the actors into the world. So before that, we have Ari as our main actor. He performs with a motion capture suit and lifelink face. So he's not actually inside the game. He is performing. He can see a screen of himself working 2D on the screen, but he's not like in headset and in the world. But this year we use MetaQuest Pro's facial tracking, so he's actually in the world and he can look from the first person point of view from the characters. And it's also an interesting challenge. It's also we made him perform 2 avatars at the same time, so he needs to jump back and forth between the 2 avatars. He also has like a third-person view avatar, so third-person view. He can perform both avatar at the same time, which is so complicated. I cannot even imagine how it works, but he did a great job.
You gotta try, because this is like all I'm seeing in my head is like Gollum, like
it's a lot like that. And I think we're gonna share our screen and do a little bit of a demonstration of some of this stuff. But like, yeah, you have to imagine you're a puppeteer, but you have multiple puppets and everyone can see you, and that's like another character. And sometimes you're like throwing a black sheet over yourself to make yourself invisible, and like the cognitive load of all the things that Ari has to be doing is really remarkable. So we're always impressed when we're like, hey Ari, we're thinking maybe this thing. And David Gotchfelder's our director, was the one who wanted to try like multiple avatars this year instead of one avatar. And we're always like really willing for Ari to push back and be like, you know what guys, it sounds cool, that's too much. And to his credit, he hasn't said that yet. So, God knows what we'll come up with next year. But so far, he's handling it all pretty well. One thing we did to bring down his cognitive load a little bit this year was AI. So June already alluded to it a little bit, but earlier this year, we were doing a project for London Tech Week with Vodafone and Infinite Reality. And this was about using in-world AI to have a metahuman who could speak to you and tell you about a car and, have a car configurator and change the colors and tell you about mileage and all that stuff. And so we got really inspired doing this client work, thinking, okay, how could this also work for theater? And one thing that's definitely been a challenge for our actors in the past has been something like, hey, can you guys actually go into the show like and make sure everyone's okay and talk to them ahead of time before you're in character and do kind of like this ushering or house management stuff, which, like you want actors to really just be able to focus on performing the roles. So the opportunity to say, can we take Ari's voice and capture that with 11 Labs? Can we take all the ways that he performs as Charles Dickens and capture that with in-world AI and add in all this fun information about like Agile Lens and all that? And we've done this live demonstration of our AI Dickens on the podcast for anyone who wants to go back and check that out. But what that's been great for this year is, about 10 minutes before the show starts, we're able to trigger this AI Dickens who comes in, and you can just have a conversation with him. You can speak naturally with your voice or type into a keyboard, and he's aware that he is like a virtual representation of Charles Dickens based on the performance of Ari Tar, and that he's created by Agile Lens. And he can also tell you about his favorite oil lamp from the 1800s. So it's a really trippy experience. How did that feel to you, June, going through that whole process with him?
Yeah, that's really fun to chat with AI because I always take too long to chat with him whenever I'm doing like a QA or testing, just stay in that process for way too long. But I think I think using Ari's voice is really important.
Mhm.
Before that, how interesting. I mean, the content is interesting, or like the content is the same, but with the robot voice, it just feel like you're talking to a robot. But with I think 11 Lab really did a great job transforming Ari's voice onto the generated content. It feels much more like you're talking to a real person, and just with the mindset that you are actually talking to a robot makes whatever his react always interesting.
Yeah, agreed. And it's really trippy the way the training works too. I'll mention briefly that earlier when June and I were doing these experiments, we were both stuck at JFK waiting for a flight all day long. And so we started to dive into things like 11 Labs and training a voice and all that. And we started with a voice that I did, and I just went off in a corner and recorded something. And of course, there was all this background noise from the airport. And what's interesting is that all gets incorporated into the voice. So then when it was generating audio that sounded like me, it also sounded like there was a bunch of people in the background. Similarly, if we took an audio clip of Ari when he bounces between different voices and he's not just playing Dickens, it's weird that you have AI Dickens. He'll be talking and he sounds like Dickens, and suddenly his voice will go very high because it's taking like some information from a little audio clip when he sounded like another character. So it's such a trippy thing to play with. I do want to mention, by the way, too, we are compensating Ari for this. We're not just like stealing his likeness and being like, ha ha, money, money, money. We want to set a good precedent here that anytime you're taking a performer's hard work with, their voice, their likeness, how they've developed a character, that we are paying him for every single show where we're selling tickets and using that. So we hope other companies will do the same.
Yeah, very interesting. So what did Ari have to do specifically for this?
Nothing. We literally could just go and take like a 90-second clip of him from a previous show or a rehearsal, and that's all we needed to make it sound just like him. It's really crazy. And then there's like places where you put in like sample dialogue, like some of the Victorian language of like, here's the kind of stuff he might say. But it's amazing how easy it is. And by the way, you don't have to be an Unreal Engine for this. Like, you go to the 11 Labs website or in World AI, and you can just start to play with this stuff. It's really remarkable, and I can't believe that we're still so early into this. To imagine where this will be in another year or 5 years is really quite remarkable.
Yeah, there's a lot of. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just gonna agree. Please, I'm sure you have more interesting thoughts than whatever I was going to say.
No, I just want to continue adding on what Alex already mentioned. So there's a lot of fun stuff with training the brain, training AI Dickens's brain, and I think Kevin would probably be the best person to like share his experience up with this. But one very interesting challenge is how to train AI Dickens to not lie. There is an interesting thing that when we asked like when is the next show, and I Dickens will just start to give random answers like, oh, I know it's today, it's this 8 p.m. and then he will apologize, oh sorry, I was mistaken, it was not right, it's actually tomorrow 7 p.m. and none of that is true.
Yeah, there's
so
also
how
a
did you get
weird
around
thing.
that? Wait.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just how did you get around that after all? Yeah, sorry.
I found that, well, I guess, so Kevin is the person actually solved this issue, but I think he just like point a very clear direction of this kind of questions, because I think before that we didn't give any information or any direction for him to go, so he just kind of go randomly. It's today, is tomorrow. But now he always say that, oh, I don't know the correct answer, but you can check on Agile Lens website, or you can talk to Agile Lens team and they will give you the like the time or something. So I think it's when you don't give it any direction, it will just go crazy and go randomly, go creative. But you just need to point at a direction.
It's fun when he very confidently tells you something incorrect,
Yeah.
or is like, oh, I hear the Ghost of Christmas Past is coming. Would you like to meet them? And I'll be like, yes. And he'll be like, oh, they're here right now. And you're like, there's no one there. And he'll be like, the Ghost of Christmas Past, I'm the Ghost of Christmas Past. And he'll like change his voice. And you'll be like, why are you doing this? We never gave you any instructions to ever do something like this.
It's look, look, man, it's AGI, we're there.
Yeah.
It wants to lie to you all the time.
Man. Cool. So, June, should we say anything else about the development, or should we dive right into, what it looks like and all that?
Oh, I do also want to mention that this
Mm.
year we got a lot more helps and developers into
Yes.
this project. I think it overall boosts the quality a lot, and also makes it even more complicated to just the
Coordination.
process of development is a lot more complicated this year. But overall, I think it has been great.
Yeah, because the first
what was
couple. Oh, go ahead, Jacob.
I was just gonna say, what was like the technical accomplishment you were most excited about or proudest of after this year?
I think that
I was just gonna say that it doesn't crash.
yeah, the stability is next level. I mean, like last year we have like 1 or 2 crash per show, and the year before we have 3 or 4 crash per show. So this year we have 0 crash per show is already amazing. I think every aspect has its I think this year's light and the transition is totally on a different level compared to the last couple of years. Definitely because we have more people like Dante. They made a great job making the levels and all the smooth transition. Like it's now fade in, not just jump in. That is for me it feels very different to have that kind of like detailed touch on the transitions. And also I think that the control of the avatar, and with now we are finally able to let Ari be in the world and perform with his own face, not just like, because Ari has been requesting it for a couple of years. He always wants to interact with the people in the world real time, and actually be able to have the eye contact with players. And this year this is finally true.
Yeah. For a performer, it can be very weird to be like, I know I'm surrounded by virtual people, but all I'm looking at is a weird meshed version of my face. And in Ari's case, the best we could do was like, we'll buy you some 32-inch TVs to like put around your room, and you'll have like some general idea of what direction everyone's in. But he was alone doing live link face with people floating around him. And so, last year, at least we were able to give him someone to talk to. So Debbie was a part of it as the ghosts. But even that, it was still a live link face, still kind of detached. And we were still having a lot of pre-recorded elements, especially because we had very little time to set everything up last year. And the development team was super small. It was like June, myself, Rob Lester, a couple other people who came in for a moment, but it was small. And so we were leaning a lot on things that were pre-recorded mocap data for the bodies. Debbie was only controlling the face. There were even scenes that were just technically complex enough that we would just trigger a sequence to make that happen. So this year, for the entire thing to be live, nothing is pre-recorded. Debbie and Ari can see each other. They can see the audience. They can interact with them. June and the team put together this great system where at any moment the audience can like send messages to everyone. We did discuss at one point, because we're all kind of ghosts as the audience members, that it would be a Ouija board, which is fun, but imagine what a nightmare that would be for like every single message you want to send, like 1 letter, 2 letter, 3 letter. So there is just like a keyboard in VR, and of course your regular keyboard if you're in desktop mode, that you can send messages that everyone else can see. We were really worried about content moderation, but luckily there haven't really been any trolls or bad folks yet.
That's good. Was that a real concern going into this year? Just given that you were on the marketplace, or because I don't know if we ever shared the conclusion to that saga. Because at one point you were talking about, hey, maybe it will get approved for Epic Games Marketplace, maybe it won't. Do you want to share more about that?
Yeah, I'll catch us up a little bit, then I'll have June kind of bring us to the finish line. But we definitely, for those who don't remember what we talked about in previous podcasts, we did submit basic stuff to the marketplace early on, just to see like, hey, what's the process look like? How do we get through all this? We talked a lot with Rob Lester, who I mentioned worked with us before, because he has an experience that's also made it through the whole marketplace. And we realized a little bit late in the process that if we wanted to be able to distribute like a key, for example, and say, hey, anyone who's going to join the show, buy your ticket and you'll get this key, and then you can go to the Epic Game Store and download it, that was actually really complicated. Like we needed needed to get everyone's Epic ID, which is, of course, a long string of numbers. And that was just going to be so much friction that by the time the show started, we were like, it's going to be a lot easier just to do a Google Drive link. The problem with that, of course, is that, it's a few gigabytes. It's not like 20 gigabytes like it was in previous years, but for anyone who doesn't have the fastest internet connection to say, oh, hey, the show's about to start. Ooh, you didn't update to the latest build. Go to Google Drive and download it. We feel bad about that. So the reason we wanted to get on the Epic Game Store and Steam was because of the ability to patch it, and be able to have it only update what needed to be patched and not do the whole thing over again. June and the team did put together a nice little system that is checking, that's always telling people whether or not they have the latest build, but it did feel like we weren't going to have a way to do this in the Epic Game Store until I'll hand it off to June and say what happened.
Until when was it? Last Friday?
Like a week ago. Yeah,
long. Like last Friday. basically like 2 weeks after we start the show. We finally passed the check, so we are finally in the live stage and finally able to publish our build.
Yeah, and I'll just share my screen just so everyone can kind of see what it looks like in the store. Because again, we thought we were going to be trying to like distribute keys and do this whole private thing, but it turned out that Epic was actually much more supportive of this than I think we were anticipating. So if you guys can see my screen right now. So here's like the dev branch of when we were trying to get everything set up, and it was just, very specific users like June and myself and a few others who could access it. But then once we had everything approved for like this private dev level where everyone could have individual keys, we realized it was actually very easy to then just go and publish it. And whoops, it's actually launching and making it available for everyone. Let me try to come back to where it was. It's so easy now. It launches so easily.
Screenshot of you on the front of the page from 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's very old. The Agile Lens YouTube channel where we're broadcasting all this is mostly just a couple unboxing videos of me from a long time ago. Yes, Charles Dickens, I hear you. Got like the whole project running right now. Okay, I just want to go to the store. Go to store page. Cool. Right, so here's the store page. It's public. Anyone can search for this and find it in the Epic Game Store. We did have to do some finagling with like how the release date worked and all that. But to Epic Games' credit, like no chance this is going to be on Steam. Like we tried to go through that process and it was super complicated. When we submitted this to Epic, they were very thoughtful. Like we were nervous about like, does Epic want like a cut of the ticket sales and all that? They actually commented on it like, hey, it looks like there's a page people need to go to purchase tickets. And we thought, oh, this is the part where they say like they need a 30% cut. They were like, we would recommend that you have a little box in here that says like, here's where you can go to buy tickets. So like they actually were trying to make it easier to create like a little HTML where, you go to the page to do all this stuff, which was very cool. And we were worried about like the AI. Tim Sweeney had already said like, we don't care, it's totally fine. And I also like the fact that when we first submitted this, their response was like, hey, it's a live show. Like, how do we access this? How do we make sure this is approved? And I just decided to say like, yeah, it's a live show. You could come to the live show, or I'm going to give you some instructions on how to pretend you're a stage manager and cycle through all the cues. And here's the script of what the actors are going to say. And like a day later, they're like, cool, thumbs up, approved, which I didn't actually expect. So that was very cool.
So there was an actual human that actually had emotions and read what you sent them, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Nice.
That was cool. I also want to give a shout out to June, who solved the weirdest problem, which was when we finally did get on the Epic Game Store, we found that if you just launched it directly from the Epic Game Store, our whole multiplayer system wasn't working. We couldn't send queues or anything. And so then it's like, oh, so now we're telling people like, okay, you can download it from Google Drive, or you can download it from the Epic Game Store. But if you do download it from the Epic Game Store, you need to find where the actual build is and then click on the exe or one of our batch files. And like that was additional friction. But yeah, June, what did we learn about what happens when you launch directly from the Epic Game Store?
Yeah, right. So that was actually a simple problem, but I just didn't realize that it has that. So if we launch from Epic Game Store, it actually adds on some just additional launch parameter. It will start with like checking if you are logged in and if you have your app ID and etc. And because we in our game we also use launch parameter to trigger several things like the server IP, like the server port or the OSC port, those kind of things. So my because I didn't expect that launch from Epic Game Store will add those launch parameters. So I only said that if the launch parameter is none, we'll have like default set of launch parameters. And then, or if the launch parameter is something else, then I will specify this and this and this. But because Epic Games Store add their own launch parameter, so there's either none and it's not my launch parameter. So it just mess up with our IP, our OSC port and system. So noticing that, I just have to remember to make the launch parameter still true if we launch from Epic Games Store.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That makes sense. Because if you ever look at like the shortcuts that they install on like your desktop, there's a bunch of stuff in there. But do they make you use like does Epic Games have like requirements against things like or about like having anti-cheat or like any sort of wrapper? Did they make you change your executable in any way to upload it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's pretty flexible. And also I tried to upload some batch files, and I was thinking maybe they will block the batch file or like maybe they will block. Oh, and also we have like an additional exe inside because we use like some Node.js stuff made from A10 and with another colleague, Marshall, who
And they just let that fly.
they just let it.
Just a Node.js file that launches.
Yeah, we're even like launch an additional batch file to launch an additional Node.js exe from inside the game, and everything just upload and just there.
That's surprising, honestly. I would have thought they'd have some pretty crazy scanners uploading content. But hey.
Yeah, surprisingly free.
Well,
cool.
Maybe they looked at like the age of your account and stuff like how old was this account, Alex, that everything was uploaded to this. That had to factor into this.
Yeah. So just to keep chugging along here, June, I don't know if you have the editor pulled up, but I thought we could just show very briefly what the project looks like. You know, especially I know a lot of people who watch the podcast, they are, you know, getting started with Unreal Engine development. And I'm sure a lot of people assume that all Unreal Engine projects from professionals, I guess we're technically professionals, are like super well organized. Everything's very, very clean. And to be fair, we did clean up this project significantly from what it looked like last year and the year before. We did like a big GitHub migration. But just to give a little sense of, you know, what this looks like, just to zoom out a little bit, is there's some things that like only the actors can see that just helps them like position themselves. There's some things only the audience or the crew can see. There's all these different levels that get turned on and off. So we're not using world partition or anything like that. Let me just toggle like a bunch of these on. And we've got a whole queue system that Josie masterminded for putting together how we like move from one spot to another. And then we also started to play with a lot of things that only turn on and off like at different quality levels. A big change this year is this is the first time where we actually let people download the experience locally, whereas in the past we did everything through pixel streaming and Cloud XR. So it's like, we're going to put everyone on RTX A6000s. Whereas now it's like, okay, what if someone downloads this and they only have GTX 1070? Like, can we get the quality settings to where they need to be? By the way, there is a benchmark system in Unreal that we had very high hopes for because it runs like a benchmark test to figure out how powerful your computer is. I think we've got this in our persistent level here. And what I learned actually very recently was that the benchmark test, here's a fun look at our spaghetti code and our persistent level. The benchmark test that runs here, it's called Run Hardware Benchmark. It's actually a very old node that goes back to like a mid version of Unreal Engine 4. And so it's not actually looking at what's in your scene. It just does like a test to like give a score to your CPU and GPU. And the work scale is kind of like the precision level. And then the score is really based on what the state of GPU and CPU hardware was back in like 2015 or something like that. And so it thinks that everyone should be running epic settings because that's, you know, all the graphics cards everyone has now are so much better. So, you know, in theory, this is great. It's like run hardware benchmark, apply the benchmark results, etc. And then, you know, here's the results everyone's in, here's the scalability, but it actually does end up being more complicated than that. June, as long as I've got the editor pulled up, anything I should navigate to briefly?
Well, I know something you should navigate to, which
Yeah.
is the settings for the project, to talk about what you included here for your rendering settings. What were the plugins you used?
Oh, sure.
Let's give the people the real dirt here.
Yeah, so we are using deferred rendering, not forward. A lot of people assume that anytime you're doing a VR project, you want to use forward. It is faster, but if you have a lot of lights, if you have metahumans do not look good in forward rendering, so we're on deferred. We were off instance stereo for a while because we were getting some weird artifacts. We did turn it back on, gives you a nice performance boost. Things are not looking weird anymore, so that's fine. Anything else, June, in here before I jump over to some of the plugins we've got on?
I think that's
How about
about
Lumen,
it.
Nanite? Those disabled, enabled?
Yeah, so we do have
Weird.
Lumen and Nanite. We are turning off the post-processing and global illumination settings, though, because it's caused some weird artifacts with the baked lighting. One of the reasons we wanted to get to 5.3 was for instanced stereo with Lumen and Nanite. Didn't quite make it there. We did get it working in 5.3, but then there were some other things that we still needed to get working back in 5.2. Still happy to be in 5.2. One thing I like to point out to people for anti-aliasing is that if you're using something like DLSS or the AMD equivalent, which I always forget the name of, which we also have in here, you need to make sure that you're not using temporal super resolution, because those are all basically competing with each other. You can either use TSR or DLSS or something else. And so if you're going to use one of those other ones, you can either have anti-aliasing set to none or temporal anti-aliasing, which can still contribute to the other settings. That's something I like to call out to people. Most times when I see people using DLSS, they still have that set to TSR. So some of the plugins we have active include, let's see, installed some basic ones. Here we go, Fidelity FX. So that's a DLSS alternative. So we're not sure if it's working properly because we don't know anyone that doesn't have an RTX card of some kind, but we do have a switch that checks to see is DLSS supported, and if not, it will use the AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution. We have the Meta XR plugin enabled, which we need for face tracking and eye tracking. That was giving us a bunch of headaches with SteamVR not working. We had the MetaHuman plugin enabled for some of the MetaHuman animator stuff we were doing, but then once that's all processed, that can be disabled. Here's the DLSS stuff. Frame generation, not actually supported by VR. Maybe it works in the 2D version. I'm not sure. June, I don't know if you know.
Not sure.
Yeah, we have Rococo. Also worth noting that June and the team put together a really good, we call it emergency mode. So if Rococo goes down, because it's a very fragile motion capture suit, Ari at any given moment can switch back over into, IK with the controllers and the head and all that. We've been waiting for a long time for Meta to update the movement SDK. They haven't. So, June has painstakingly built a lot of that stuff from scratch. The Victory BP library is a very common plugin that a lot of people use for things like, IP addresses and all sorts of other little things. Vive OpenXR, June recently enabled to see if that would help us with SteamVR things.
Runtime data table. Yeah, we use that to just grab information from Google Sheet. So we can update our next show to the countdown clock of our next show, and also the latest version of the current build.
That's pretty interesting. Wait. So what information is coming from Google Sheets?
Yeah, we just use that.
You're like, your database is Google Sheets, and you're pulling from. Oh, that's insane. Okay, wait. So what's in Google Sheets?
We have.
I'm sorry, you can't get away
show
with this
that.
one.
Yeah, I might have the web link handy.
Yeah, do you have the web link? I can. So
that's pretty cool.
And this is another thing that we first did another project. One of the first projects June and I worked with was a VR training thing, and we actually had a connection to Google Sheets that would take data from people answering multiple choice questions and getting everything that way.
What's like a nice survey system, huh?
That's cool. June, what's the name of that file? I just want
to. It's 2023 showtime. Oh no, ACC VR showtimes.
ACC VR showtimes. There we go. Yeah. So it looks like this. Here you go, hackers. If you want to get into this file, you can screw up all sorts of fun things.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's basically just and also Marshall is still the person who made the system. But we first started to use the data something runtime plugin when we were doing 4 seasons. We allow the host to put in every client's name and then send it to put the name in Google Form, and then it will like document in Google Sheet, and we grab the data from Google Sheet. And before we use this plugin, I think a thing that worth mentioning is that before that, Marshall was using the default plugin. I think it's like HTTP
Oh
something.
yeah.
The Unreal official plugin. But if we use that plugin, it will always crash our build.
I think it was
Oh yeah,
HTTP
I've used this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. HTTP blueprint. Yeah, that is going to crash the build. So don't use that.
Yeah, fun stuff. And so what you're seeing in that Google Sheet, so down here in the lobby, by the way, great Vertex animated people from Dante. Good job, Dante. Before we actually had more metahumans, which was kind of heavy. This is simpler and cooler. So if I turn off some of the things in here, boop, 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 boop. Oh, I forgot that it's like manual visibility, hide selected. Let's turn back on the Dickens house. So everything you're seeing in that Google Sheet, we access for the show times, which is in a couple spots like here. So this says when the next show is going to be. There's another one over there. And then there's a thing up here that accesses the version in the Google Sheet, compares it against the version you have, and will tell you if you need to update. Thankfully, in the Epic Games Launcher, it does it automatically. But for anyone who is downloading from Google Drive, it will tell them if they don't have the latest build.
That's pretty fascinating. I got to say, so like this versus, especially for this use case where it's stuff that you're going to be manually editing a lot. You're not going to it doesn't make necessarily sense to build a UI around this, right? To not have to deal with a normal database and just use a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that's pretty cool. I you know, the programmer in me, you know, hates it, but the logic part of me loves it. So I can appreciate it.
Yeah, there's so many hoops that we've jumped through to like not have to deal with AWS and like dedicated servers and all these traditional things that people would have, Firebase and whatnot. So you know, anytime we can just be like, oh, a Google Doc, cool. What's the link? Here you go. We get pretty happy about that. We also have a nice corner here, by the way. It's not quite an Easter egg, but some of the other Agile Lens theater projects over there. Ari Tar in the first year had set up some cool little plaques of some of the VR technology that was around when Charles Dickens was around, like wonderscopes and stereoscopes. And these are actual, I forget the term for these slides that would be projected.
Magic lanterns.
Magic lantern. Thank you so much, Jacob. Perfect. So those are all in here. And we also did, oh, June, why don't you talk briefly about what our ticket check was?
Yeah, so that we had a meeting about how are we going to do the ticket check, how are we going to really screen and filter out the people that actually have a ticket. So originally, I think we want to make it a DLC.
A DLC for the Epic Games Store, yeah.
But in short, it's too complicated. And at the time we want to actually make a ticket, it's already too late for us to start to learn how to make DLC and how to make it work. So, basically at the end, we decided that and because at first we wanted to make it so that when people download, they only download the lobby and they need to buy a ticket to download the full version. But then we start to worry, what if people just decided to buy the ticket the last minute and they need to spend another 20 minutes to download the whole build? So we decided that we just want to have the full build just be there, and we want people to solve a puzzle to get their ticket. So we actually make it a little escape room game in there. We just hide our key in one of the book in the bookshelves, and if they buy the ticket, we will send them in an instruction of how to get your key. Your key is actually hidden in that book in the second shelf or some shelf, and you have to grab your key and bring the key to a hidden door, and then you will be in the official pre-show lobby. And we also think that if someone just did the effort to flip all the books and find the key, maybe they just deserve to see the show.
Yeah, they shouldn't have to pay. They worked hard.
I thought for sure you were gonna say it was a Google sheet. I'm gonna be honest. I thought for sure you're gonna be like, yeah, you know, we just make up passwords in a Google sheet and just send them out. Like I thought for sure.
Oh, we
But no,
did
that's
also
pretty
have a
cool. That's pretty
password
clever.
to
Yeah.
bypass everything.
That's fair. No, that's pretty fun. Well, you're kind of leaking this though. We got to make sure this doesn't come out until after the last show, right? When is the last show?
Well,
We have a 7 p.m. show Eastern Standard Time tomorrow, then a 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show Saturday, and then Sunday will be an all day long pre-recorded live stream. So that's Christmas Eve, of course. So we'll have, you know, selections of our favorite streams. Maybe there will be a little bonus Easter egg in there of something from years past. And yeah, we hope a lot of people come. We did decide to make the tickets free for the final 2 shows because we went with a season pass model, with the idea being we wanted people to support kind of the development, almost like an early access thing for how the show would evolve over the course of December. But now that the show's kind of reached its final form, I say that knowing that June and I are still adding a bunch of things to the GitHub in prep for tomorrow. We thought we just want as many people to see this as possible. And it's a nice kind of Christmas present to the world for everyone to see everyone's hard work. So yeah, we hope everyone comes and checks it out. I also thought I could show a little bit of what this looks like when you first come in. So June, why don't you narrate us through this a little bit and I'll just kind of do it.
Oh yeah, so the first thing that happened in front of you would be to set your own name. So yeah, like that. And then you will see on the easel is the instruction and welcome menu, and on the left-hand side is the little mirror-like thing that will be the look of your avatar, and it will be the same thing other people sees you. There are different colors, and yeah, you can send out message. It will be like a little message box in front of you. And when you're saying something, you will be bright yellow, just so everyone else know you're saying something. Yeah, and on the left easel is the instruction of the non-VR users. But if you join in VR, that will be the VR instruction. Also, I think so if you're a non-ticketed user, I think this build is running on a crew rehearsal batch file, so the Deacons didn't say anything.
Oh, he did
But if
actually.
you-
No, yeah,
Oh,
he
he
was
did?
a little loud. So here, let me do a quick. Here's a fun shortcut: restart level will actually restart your game. And we do have this in a development build, not a shipping build. So anyone who actually wants to go enter a bunch of CVARs, you're more than welcome to. So here he is.
Yeah, so yeah, we have this welcome pre-recorded Dickens. He's going to do a short introduction of this show, and will encourage you to buy the ticket. Yeah, and this is done by Ari and through MetaHuman Animator, I believe.
Yeah.
After he finished the talk, his head will actually continue to track you. Because it'll just look at you.
Just a little creepy.
Just a little bit.
Good to know he's watching. So here's the information about the next show over there. And then, you know, because we're pretty much letting everyone come into these final 2 shows. So the escape room thing we mentioned is we tell people to come up, open the book here. You can open the other books as well if you want to. You know, nothing in there. But here's the key. You grab the key, comes over to you. And then, oh, look, a door has appeared with the Marley knocker. And so you go over and you put it in his mouth. And then it brings you into the actual pre-show lobby. And then you're ready for the actual show. Congratulations, you're in the official pre-show lobby.
Very cool.
And then, yeah, go ahead,
Talk
Jacob.
to AI Dickens, do you just like...
Ooh, June, can you cue that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So June has a host build going, so she can actually make things happen. And we'll definitely want to do a screen share where we can also show what some of the behind the scenes stuff looks like as well.
Okay, so first one. Okay, the next one is going to show AI Dickens.
I wonder if he can hear me. Oh, yes, he can.
Of course, my dear.
Charles, do you know what podcasts are?
I'll read his line so people can hear it.
Yes,
Yes, I'm familiar with podcasts.
Glad to hear that, my dear.
I'm glad to hear that, my dear. Is there a particular podcast you would like to discuss, or perhaps a topic you would like to explore?
No, that's all for now, Charles. We got a lot to cover tonight.
Of course.
Of course, my dear. I understand. Well, I will be here when you are ready. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you need any assistance.
Goodbye.
Have a wonderful evening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your performance. Of the performance.
Yeah. And so these other little lens flares you see floating around, these are other people inside the multiplayer experience right now. Normally, I
One
would
of
see their
it is
names. Yeah.
me. Let me see.
Yeah,
think
so that's
I
moving.
have
There we go. Crew. There's the
me.
crew. Yeah.
And I can talk to you.
Oh, right. Yeah. Let's see the crew say something.
Oh,
Hello.
hi.
Yeah.
Oh,
I am
Yeah.
scared. Oops. Yeah. You send out your little messages. Scared. Cool. Okay. And then if the show was now about to start, can we show a little bit, even though we don't have Ari here, a little bit what it would look like when Ari enters the household here, the Dickens house lobby?
Yeah, let me just trigger the next queue, and well, we cannot move Dickens there, but we can show Scrooge.
Yeah. And so this might be a cool moment to maybe, if June, if you want to share your
Oh, yeah,
screen
I
once
can
you have like
share my screen.
Rococo up and running. Yeah. So I'm obviously doing everything the way like an audience member would see it, but let's see a little bit behind the scenes.
For those who are audio listeners, all I've seen so far is Scrooge T-posing next to a podium. So,
Yeah.
you know, I gotta see where this goes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I need to upgrade my plan.
You have to
for
upgrade your
Rococo.
plan.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, how about we try something else and
yeah, well, June,
while I update my plan.
should I show a little bit of the camera system for a moment?
Oh yeah, that would be great.
So throw a ghost in here too, and I'll show a little bit about how we're trying to do the live stream this year.
Let me transition everyone to London to have more space.
There you go.
And
So
I will show the ghost. Okay, so all three characters are in the scene.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So we got a Marley, a Dickens, and a Scrooge. And so the camera system is something I started to work on last year, but really just ran out of time for, because I always feel bad when people are like, oh, I'd love to see the show. I don't have a VR headset. I don't feel comfortable with pixel streaming or, you know, any of the interactive things. And, you know, even for just like my mom, like I want to make it easy for them to watch the show. So we wanted to set up an easy way to jump to different cameras. And here's a fun thing. Even though we do have a specific set of launch parameters for Carlos Austin, who's editing everything on the fly, anyone, if they hit the caps locks key, even just in your regular show, this will put you in a camera mode where the number keys 1 through 9 and then also 0, as well as RTY will jump you to different camera angles. So if I press the 1 key, we'll get this wide shot of Scrooge. The equivalent would be 6, which would be kind of the wide shot of our ghost. 2 is a little bit closer, right? And then 3 becomes kind of an interesting over the shoulder shot. So we're doing all this based on bones and like where bone locations are and jumping to different locations. Oh, there we go. We got a little bit of
So this all changes as the scene progresses.
Exactly. So it's finding the different bone locations and then doing everything relative to their bones. And if at any given moment you want to do like a clean back and forth, if you press the space bar, it'll do kind of like a clean swap. So same thing over here. If I'm in like the wide shot over here, so, you know, equivalent,
Oh, wow.
equivalent. And then if I want to do, you know, stuff with Dickens, then I've got him over here as well with RTY. So this is meant to make it much easier for our live streaming team to get good shots. We also have key 5, which is kind of just like a nice rotating aerial, and Control and Shift will actually lock the cameras in certain locations. Oh, here we go, Rococo. Yeah. So we got some Rococo data streaming through. Lovely. Definitely not Ari's performance. And the VCam stuff is cool. So VCam, for those who don't know, is something that runs typically for, virtual production shoots. It's a way to take like a phone and then treat it as an actual camera, and it only runs in the editor. So next to me, I have a laptop that is running the editor and has VCam open. And then over here on my other phone, I can pixel stream into that computer. And Jackie, who operates the VCam during the show, we actually set up the VPN. Jacob and I had a big VPN discussion a couple of weeks ago. And so Jackie is able to VPN into my local network. So when she opens the LiveLink VCam app, it thinks that she's on my network and she can very easily connect to it. So right now, if I move the camera around here, I am actually, just like walking through the space. So this is using AR to kind of move. And at any given moment, if someone watching the show were to press the 0 key, that actually gives them kind of a dampened view of whatever I'm doing, or usually Jackie is doing with the VCam, which is kind of cool. So if she's, moving up and trying to get like a nice close-up of Scrooge or whatever, doing this in kind of a touchscreen way. So, I'm trying to get a nice shot of Scrooge, and I'm right here, and then the camera's gonna, make its way over to there as well. So it's just kind of cool that this is something that is designed for the live stream team, but anyone can be doing this as well. So this is meant to make our YouTube streams much more dynamic than they typically would be. Any questions on that, Jacob?
I mean, I think that's really cool. Like how long, or let me say this. What do you think the advantages were from the perspective of the people putting on the show of having a more curated view here? Because you have all the keys. Like, are you worried that they're going to miss a moment? Do you feel like this is like, and do you have any information about like what sort of views people were using the most? Do you have an intuition maybe on what sort of views people were using the most?
Well, whenever someone goes to one of these views, their pawn is actually being moved. We're not jumping them to cameras. We are putting their pawn there. So we can actually see if people are using these views by noting like, oh, hey, someone's in camera 5 because they're rotating around the scene. We're also going to have scale. So you'll also get a sense of how people are, changing different scales a little bit as the show goes on. Yeah, that's all a very fun way, I think, to experience a show. Also, if you don't like, there's times where you got to cover some ground. And if Ari's like, this way, everyone, and you got to go for a walk. And if you're not the kind of person who wants to use WASD or an Xbox controller, just knowing that at any given moment, you can like snap right over to, where Scrooge is or something is definitely handy. So as you can see here, even though Scrooge is moving around, we're getting kind of this dampened view that moves with him. But for our live stream, we'll typically, freeze the camera and try to get a shot there. And then when we need a different shot, then we'll jump over to, a new location. Oh, and here's a cool way we're using pixel streaming this year. So June and I set it up so that there are all of these cameras actually running on CoreWeave in the cloud. So Carlos and everyone else actually is able to see what all of these procedural cameras are seeing at any given moment as kind of a video village. So then Carlos has kind of a view of all of those. And then he knows, oh, hey, if I cut to this view of, Dickens right now, I know what it's going to look like. I think it's going to be a good shot.
Cool.
And he's not just kind of guessing like, oh, maybe the shot will be good, maybe it won't be, et cetera, et cetera.
How good was the synchronization there, given that you're kind of sending these cues, separately to each client?
Good. I don't think anyone's felt like they've been lagging or the latency has been perceivable, right, June?
Yeah, that's pretty real time.
Yeah.
The only problem is the internet,
Right.
I think.
Yeah,
That's
a lot
always
of
the
people
problem.
a lot of people think they have more stable internet than they do, when really it's like a lot of spikes and dropped signals and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
June, do you have a good backstage view to share?
Yeah. Let me share my screen. If I can press optimize.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. On the right hand side here, this is the host build, but we actually make it just the same as a client build, more because it's easier for debugging. So we just need like one host view to to check everything is working. So in host here, we actually is able to see like how many client audiences we have right now. And yeah, and we are also counting like how many non-VR player has joined and how many VR player has joined. And on the left side here is our crew build, which is the stage manager build. So we know that we are currently in, say, the queue number 3. So if I hit spacebar, I can load the next queue, and hit it again, it will trigger it. And I can do some like emergency control things, like I can hide Dickens. So you can see that for the general, for audiences, Dickens is hidden, but for the crew, we can still see where Dickens is, and it will just have like a big sign saying hidden.
I personally like the big red button on your screen that says "Show is finished." Kick everyone
Yeah.
out. That's a good, and even better one that says "Ari emergency." Please,
Yeah.
you got to give me some backstory there.
Yeah. So our emergency is going to be hit once Rococo is done. So because Rococo just likes to randomly lose an arm or lose a leg or just randomly likes to crash. So when that happens, we will hit RE emergency, and we will change to use the IK control. So we'll just go back to controller and headset. And so yeah, but we can swap between emergency and non-emergency.
Nice.
You also can see, Jacob, that we're very concerned about trolls, and so we have like blocking IP addresses and all sorts of stuff. Like just in case someone's trying to ruin the show, we have something we can do.
Like now, I just blocked Alex.
Oh no!
Oh, nice.
Oh, June.
Oh, that's cool. So like the moderation stuff is definitely very cool, and not the kind of thing you would get out of a normal multiplayer system, I would guess.
Yeah. We probably will be able to have it on the normal multiplayer system, but I guess it will have to go through the same like hands-on modification to build the system.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Things like we have the emergency control to make Dickens back to stage center, or Debbie back to stage center.
Yeah, because in both VR and in a Rococo suit, you do often have to deal with drift, where like the performer hasn't moved, but their body just starts to go to the wrong place. And the show is blocked, just like a real theater performance, where it's like, you know, Ari starts here and he takes 5 steps forward and Debbie turns and they're facing each other. And if they are too far off from that, it changes a lot of things, especially for things like our camera people who are counting on like, I really like the angle where you see Ari and then the door knocker and then all that kind of stuff happening all at the same time.
Yeah. And last thing is we have different actor for Gabby and
so I'm curious with Ari's system where you mentioned he's like going back and forth between multiple characters. How are you doing that behind the scenes to like actually map his voice and motion so that it doesn't become jarring?
Yeah, we're still figuring out how to do the spatial audio. So we actually are just broadcasting his audio in a non-spatial way. It's just like the general 2D audio for Ari. As for the animation, we have the thing. So actually, Ari's pawn is the same pawn as everyone else's pawn, and we were just attaching his pawn to different head location on Dickens and on Scrooge, or so on a third point of view.
Would the character he's not part of just switch to IK? Is that, or like a fixed animation?
Yes, that's it. Oh yeah, because we're okay, none of us are in our review, so it's hard to show. But yeah, so when Ari is in Dickens, Scrooge will be freeze to his last pose.
Okay.
We have some discussion about like how if we want to make it fall back to an idle animation, or we want it to fall back to just like freeze. And because I think at first we tried the idle animation, but it's kind of weird that when Scrooge is doing something and when he jumps back to Dickens, Scrooge will just quickly stand up and lerp into
Yeah.
idle animation. Well, yeah, it's more because if we want to make it beautiful, it's too much work to to do like 30 different idle animation. So
Jacob,
we just
are you
fall back to freeze.
yeah, Jacob, are you familiar with the improv game called Freeze?
No.
So this used to be on things like Whose Line Is It Anyway? And everyone who's ever done improv in like college or whatever, there's a game where you're doing a scene and then usually two people, and then someone else will yell freeze, and both characters will freeze their position, and then someone else will go and tap someone on the shoulder, assumes the same position, and now what was oh my god you're going to kill me is like now we're going to go in for a big hug or something like that. So then you change the scene. So there's a little bit of that Ari uses here, because as he jumps back and forth between the characters, they will freeze in the last position that he left them in, and he'll do that for these very tender moments sometimes where Dickens is pretending to be Belle and the hand is reaching out and Scrooge goes and like touches the hand, and so Ari has to set all of this up as he jumps between the different characters. June, should I try launching either as Debbie or Ari just to show a little bit what that looks like?
Yeah, it will be fun. I think either will work. If you're going to jumping as Ari, I will stop the Rococo animation, so you will
Gotcha.
won't be
Yeah,
moving.
let me try. Although we can watch it freak out and fight for a second.
Hit the RA emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing we do a lot of in Unreal Engine, which I wish I learned about a lot earlier, is using batch files. So if you've got a bunch of different variables and parameters in like your game instance, then you can have a batch file that calls on all of those and says like, we are doing a rehearsal right now. So skip past like all the ticket checks. This person is going to be launching with these quality settings, or as an actor or as a crew member. And so, you can create a batch file just with a simple notepad kind of setup. And I think I did show a little bit of that stuff when we were talking about pixel streaming the other week. But it's a really useful way to make sure Unreal Engine is launching a build exactly the way you want it to.
Yeah, we can show it briefly. It's a little secret. So we just use things like actor equals to true, and use something to change the port, and specify like this player will be client or host, and if this build is going to be Ari, things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I set it to be the emergency mode. So now if you're jumping, you should be able to control the avatar with controllers.
Okay. I might be in a weird wonky build because it's not launching at the moment. Let me try. Oh, here it goes. Whoop, nope. No, it's not. Let me try again. Launchy, launchy, launch.
Oh, actually, I can try to launch as Debbie.
Yeah, go ahead. One fun thing too about our multiplayer system is we can have multiple instances running on one computer. So I'm on, a beefy RTX 4090, and I actually found I can have 4 instances of the game running at once, one of them in VR, 3 of them not in VR, and it's actually pretty smooth, and I can kind of just get a good bird's eye view of a lot of the stuff happening that I would have assumed I would need to be using pixel streaming for, but not true.
Yeah. Very cool.
Oh, we have Josie in the chat. Josie wants to know, can I exclude things using a batch file?
Well, that's just, I think so. Yeah, that's the same as like pick things to a batch file, right?
Yeah, I think it's the same idea. I think what actually happened on my end is my Airlink broke. There's so many hoops we jump through for this stuff, and it's so easy for like one thing to break. We had a weird thing where Ari put on the MetaQuest Pro, and it was like, oh, his controllers aren't tracking now. He didn't do anything wrong. It just, an update from Meta or some weird little firmware problem is suddenly just making it so the controllers don't work.
So we also had a lot of fun with Steam VR.
Yes, Steam VR has been a nightmare because we know so many people, of course, who have a Valve Index or Vive or I was testing with a Vario XR3 over here, which not many people have, but we want, of course, this to work on as many headsets as possible. And we were getting crashes and black screens, and it seemed like one thing we started to do a week ago was try to translate all the OSC face data, eye and mouth tracking data, because that would actually allow us to disable the Meta XR plugin. But then we had Wit on our team testing a build where we weren't asking him to test Steam VR. We just wanted to know if he was getting a DLSS crash, which was like a weird thing we were troubleshooting. And then he's like, oh, no, the crash is gone. Everything's running fine in my Valve Index. And we're like, wait, what do you mean everything's running fine in your Valve Index? He's like, yeah, look, here's a screenshot. Everything's fine. And we're like, wait, so you are in Steam VR and it's working? And he's like, yeah, what's the big deal? It's like, wait, we haven't gotten Steam VR to work yet. That's incredible news. So this week has been a lot of trying to figure that out and make it consistent.
What's been the biggest challenge? I mean, you guys launched on a ton of platforms, or you know, different devices, different ways of accessing it. What was the biggest pain or the biggest challenge and all that?
What do you think, June?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is Steam VR.
Yeah.
I think the different headset it's really making it challenging. Like just the fact that they have different buttons, and we still have problem with like the VR controller binding on Steam VR. But overall, I think it's fine. I still think like 90% of the things kind of just work because we're also because we're targeting only at PC VR, not like standalone VR. So in theory, we are just making one.exe, and that executable is able to handle everything in theory.
It's tricky because we have, obviously we love desktop VR and we want to be able to use Lumen and Nanite and all these incredible Unreal Engine features. But a lot of the people who have shown interest in the show have been like, oh, well, how can I just run it standalone? Nice job, June. For anyone who can't see, June is acting as the Ghost of Christmas Past right now. And you can see some of the IK stuff. And June, do we have face tracking there as well?
Yes, but I am very dark in the scene, so I'm going to change myself to.
Yeah. We also have like a
Marley.
rehearsal light. We can turn on a light just to make it easier for everyone to see everything.
Oh, no, we kind of closed it actually.
Yeah. Oh, we did? Oh, did we disable it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's June coming up to the camera as Marley and is waving at us. Our audio here. Yeah. And yeah, so this is, you know, it's like this kind of stuff. So much of the stuff is out of the box for like our friends at, you know, Ferryman Collective, who do a lot of live VR theater in things like VR chat. There's all this stuff that comes out of the box when you're using an existing platform. And we have ended up painstakingly building a lot of this from scratch for Unreal Engine because those tools don't really exist yet. So I'm very, very proud of June and the whole team for everything they've accomplished. And I should also mention, like, no investors, like no one's come on board and been like, I want to give you guys $1 million to make this happen. So we're really doing this in a bootstrappy kind of way. Certainly hoping that it leads to more projects and bigger projects, but it's absolutely been a labor of love so far.
Yeah. I mean, it shows, and every year it's gotten better.
Yeah. In June, I, for some reason, just can't launch AirLink right now. That's a thing that happens. Do you want to try relaunching as Ari just to show a little bit of what it looks like to jump back and forth?
Oh yeah, sure.
Cool. Yeah. It's good to have multiple headsets for testing. Like, you know, I mentioned the Vario XR3, Quest Pro, Quest 3. I got a Vive in the other room. We've got a Vive X or Vive XR Elite. June has a what's it called? The Vive Focus 3.
Focus 3, yeah.
Yeah, because all these headsets are going to behave a little bit differently. And one thing that, like, I honestly don't think we're going to fix before tomorrow, but it's good to know, is like people have reported when they open this with a Valve Index, SteamVR is working, hooray, but the controllers are rotated like 90 degrees. And it's like weird. And there's not a super easy way to just run a check to be like, is someone using the Valve Index? If so, you know, rotate controllers into the correct position. And even if we could do that check, because we don't have a Valve Index, we don't know like exactly what that rotation should be. So it's very difficult to get all this working for multiple platforms. I do wonder if by this time next year, we'll be talking about how we ported the whole thing for standalone headsets like the Vive Focus 3 and MetaQuest 3 and that kind of stuff.
Or the Apple Vision Pro.
Or the Apple Vision Pro. That would be pretty cool. I'd love to say there's a tabletop AR version of this that you can just drop in the middle of your living room and watch it as like a little diorama thing. One thing I'm hoping to get working by tomorrow that isn't working at the moment is I really love the way things like Tilt Brush work, where you can like grab and move around the world and scale the whole thing up and down. And I did a little test a few months ago where this all felt really good with that. But I didn't know if that was like a default movement system we'd want to have. So maybe by the live show tomorrow, we'll have a little like checkbox you can hit inside the menu that will allow you to activate like tilt brush mode and decide, do you want all the characters to look like they're 100 feet tall, or do you want them all to feel like they're little action figures on your desk? Anyways, David, Jacob, how about you describe what you see June doing right now for our audio listeners?
Yeah, well, at the moment, I would describe it as Dickens hoisting Scrooge like a kitten gets, like a
Badly behaved kid.
Yeah, it gets, like carried by like the back of the neck by its mother kind of thing. It's a bit unsettling. I'm not gonna lie, but I can't tell if it's unsettling because Scrooge becomes weightless and all of a sudden, loses the fundamental essence of Scrooge, or if it's because he looks like he's dead, just goes limp. But really, you should be watching this episode on YouTube. If you have the ability, jump onto YouTube for the end of this so you can watch these demos because they are pretty fun.
By the way, speaking of, yeah, sorry, go ahead, June.
I do call this Scrooge dead.
Scrooge dead.
In Unreal.
Yeah, he just limp. I love that we can just play with this stuff. By the way, I gave a shout out to our friends at the Ferryman Collective, and I just noticed we actually have Braden Roy, one of the amazing co-founders, also the mayor of the Underpresents, fun fact, in the chat. And Braden wants to know if Ari, Debbie, or anyone else has run into issues with disorientation when they're swapping avatars and points of view on the fly rapidly, or has that process been seamless for them? How would you answer that, June?
That's definitely difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
I think we spent like 2 or 3 or even more weeks just to fix the head rotation and the body, just to make sure like the head orientation is correct when swapping between avatars.
Yeah, and we try to give them some clues to keep them oriented, like the big green upstage sign. So like as the sets are changing around them, they just have very easy things to help keep them in the correct orientation. One nice thing about virtual reality, of course, that we can't do in the real world is we can have very clear markers and things that only certain people can see and other people can't. Again, we can divide things up into like crew, performers, audience members. Is this your view right now, June?
Yeah, so this is the view from SRE. So we can see that in the third person view, we also have this kind of marker to show the front being the avatar's front. So because I'm actually like in a third person view right now. So if I just rotate 180 degree, well now I cannot show that, but if I hide this, and if I just rotate 180 degree, the content would just be like non-human,
not human
rotation.
Anymore.
So yeah, we do this kind of like small diagrams to help with the orientation here and there.
Yeah. We did have a lot of fun. We did a demo of this at Unreal Fest, and then also for the real-time conference using Radical AI, which is a markerless mocap solution that just uses a webcam. And we had Ari and Dante giving a bit of a demo of what that looks like. And the answer is very good. We just haven't been able to incorporate it into the experience because of the fact that it doesn't currently work with builds, and there's some other like complexities about getting it all out. But I think we are excited about adding more ways that our performers can do their show, whether it's entirely from within a VR headset or using a webcam or using a motion capture suit. It's nice that there's more and more options that are affordable and easy for a performer to do from the comfort of their living room. Yeah, I'm so frustrated with Meta because some of the IK stuff they have is really, really excellent. And they've brought a lot of it to like Unity. They have not done any of it for Unreal Engine yet. And the stuff that they have done for Unreal Engine has very poor documentation. So, it hurts me to think about how much June and some of the other members of our development team have had to build a bunch of things from scratch that do actually exist. We just haven't been able to access them. Fun little thing too is when Ari jumps back and forth between Scrooge and Dickens, there's kind of this little like spirit Niagara particle effect that we can see there a little bit. Yeah. So if you're watching very closely, you can kind of almost feel like it's Ari's soul jumping between these characters to possess them. It looks like Dickens is about to kiss Scrooge or something. There's like a little bit of a
yeah, it's very intimate scene you're showing us.
Yeah. So for the past couple of weeks, our Rococo suit has been down, and Ari and Debbie have both been entirely in VR. We did manage to get Ari all the wires he needs to manually repair the Rococo suit himself. And so for Friday and Saturday, hopefully we will be in full body mocap, and you won't just see them standing up the whole time. That'll be fun. Cool. Well, I feel like we're covering a lot of ground here. Jacob, do you have any other questions about this fun monstrosity of a show?
No, I mean, I think people should definitely check it out if they haven't. I think it's just exciting to see how much you guys invest in this every year, and to see it, continue to improve, and you're pushing, boundaries in very interesting ways. So definitely people should check it out if they haven't. Or, if you got a nice checkbook, maybe sponsor next year's performance. Look, if you don't want to do the shameless plug, I'll do.
Thank you, Jacob. We'll give you a commission for anyone who comes on board and is like, yes, take $12 as a
I'll give
gracious
you
donation.
Yeah. I'll send you pizza. No.
Yeah. But the thing is that it's a fun way for us to take a lot of what we've learned over client work over the year. And the goal really is to be able to say, hey, Ferryman Collective, or folks who, act in other shows and in things like Mozilla Hubs. We were doing stuff with like Onboard XR and WebXR. Other people from other theater companies, whether they are involved in tech or not, we want to be able to give them these tools and have it be as straightforward as possible for them to put on their own shows. And we're just dog fooding it all right now. We're doing it ourselves. And one of our goals for 2024 is to get these hands into the tools of other performers and creators. And for us also to crank out a lot more quick shows that maybe take a week to produce rather than a couple months.
So quick question as we kind of close things out here. Given that this is an opportunity for you guys to explore new things inside of Unreal, or try things for the first time, I'm gonna ask both of you to maybe point to what was the most surprising thing you learned about Unreal Engine in the process of building this year's Christmas game. And June, why don't you start?
Unreal is always full of surprises, I think. Most surprising thing. Well, I think that I think the most surprising thing, or maybe it's not a surprise for many people, but for me, I think it's Unreal is actually really flexible. Because we kind of Frankenstein a lot of system to build our system, and it's really good to be able to find a plugin that can do OSC, and find another plugin that can do WebSocket client, and then find yet another plugin that can do WebSocket server. We are kind of Frankenstein like all these kind of systems, and even Google Sheet into our system.
Yeah.
To make this happen. So
quick on that, June, one thing we didn't mention was like one thing we were really nervous about was we thought we were going to have to ask everyone who came to the show to like manually open ports on their router,
right,
which would have been
yeah.
a nightmare. But a lot of the logic that the team built that was done for that kind of system using OSC and port forwarding and all that was able to be brought over to like a WebSocket system, which did not need that.
Yeah, I mean, none of our team are like very networking experts. We're just kind of try and error and found, oh, this method doesn't require port forwarding. Great. So we're just like trying to make it happen, and then we kind of made it happen. And I really put surprisingly, yeah, it gave us a lot of like flexibility to combine with different systems, I think.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I would say Unreal Engine is a minefield, and no matter how much you learn about it, there will always be things that have you banging your head against the wall. I definitely expected, if I had told myself, 8 years ago when I first started using Unreal, that I might spend an entire day trying to get Steam VR to not be a black screen when I'm the only person getting a black screen and no one else is. And then the solution, as like June discovered, was like, oh, you need to uninstall Virtual Desktop and have this particular setting in Steam VR. Like, it's this kind of stuff that there's no documentation for this stuff. It's all trial and error, and you either figure it out or you don't, and you find a workaround. And to be working in this industry, especially one like VR, where everything is changing all the time and doesn't have as many users active, you just need to be willing to like try, and not give up and just figure it out or do your best. So as long as you have the kind of mentality to know that it's never going to get easier, just different, then you are in the right place, because it is kind of like a drug addiction, right? Like when things are working, like I had one really good development night where there were like 9 things on the list of like nice to have features for the production I was able to knock off, and every one of them worked the first time I put on the headset. That feels great. That's thrilling. But then yes, there are other times when you spend several days trying to make a thing work that should be so simple and it's just not.
Yeah, I find this that true of most technology that you develop any sort of expertise in, right? Like there's always a deeper rabbit hole when it comes to these things. And you get more ambitious, in lockstep with how much you learn, because everything you learn just opens up, oh, well, what if I use this for this, and this? So I think Alex is right. Like it doesn't become easier. It's different. And usually the challenges you're facing might seem, just as trivial as the ones you were dealing with when you started using something like Unreal Engine. But in the end, the outcome is going to be way better, right?
Yeah.
Because you've done the cycles to understand what it is you need to bang your head against that actually produces the, what you need to do. But I think that's true of just about any technology or that you try and learn, or any sort of, probably any task you put your mind to, that you really develop expertise in. And Unreal Engine is just, it goes deep enough that it fits into that kind of category.
And there is something very fun about feeling like you're trying something out that has never been done before. And Unreal Engine, of course, covers so many industries. So like we're taking things like OSC, or, the way we're doing stuff with metahumans or live mocap or the VCam, and we're repurposing all those things in a new way. And sometimes it breaks because it wasn't designed for that. And sometimes it works surprisingly well, and we feel like we, all deserve to eat some cake. One thing I want to mention before I forget is we do have another question in the chat. Space Wrecked says, thoughts on physical/on location room scale MR and XR experiences. I'm a caveman to basic blueprint knowledge, so this is my path.
Do you want to answer that?
I'll mention briefly that we do stuff sometimes that is on location. It is always interesting when you're trying to program things for a particular place. We have a poster in the lobby for Christmas Carol for a production we did called Ghosted, which was on Magic Leap and was designed for a very specific location and setup. And that's interesting when you're like, people are going to be sitting at this table and this is the stuff in the environment, and we want all of that to be part of the show instead of things being entirely virtual. Everything with Apple is going to be very much with that as a consideration, because you can literally dial up and down how much of the real world you see. And if you want the real world to be any part of what's going on, then that becomes a really big design consideration. And you have to find yourself thinking about, how do I procedurally have things that will always work as long as there's a table or a chair? And how do I have things that are like, well, we really need to like get rid of the real world and have everything be virtual for this to be effective correctly. I'll also give a quick shout out to a production we're working on for next year called Ink and Paint, which will be opening probably sometime in April. And it's basically Who Framed Roger Rabbit live in a physical theater with like AR characters moving around a space. And there's elements that you will see regardless of whether or not you're using an AR device. And so the mixing and matching of like, how do you make something feel magical, and how do you make the tech feel like it's servicing narrative and story without it feeling like a gimmick? That's always a really interesting challenge. What do you think, June?
I think from an architectural background, I think room scale VR is really it's really amazing and attracts me a lot, because I think the major difference for me about VR or XR, this kind of tools, different from the traditional 2D screen, is that we have the sense of scale. So we can use our physical body to just experience the world, the virtual world that is that's presented to us by grabbing or by stealing our visual and sound system to fake it, and with the actual space to play with and to just kind of experience it, is just make it even more believable. So yeah, and like the Four Seasons project we briefly mentioned is the full room scale VR project. That I think gives
room scale is an understatement there.
yeah, it's what is like
5,000 square feet
garage scale or like yeah. Yeah, well, I do hope there are more that kind of project.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think he's also wondering about the development side of it. Like, one thing we're trying to do, June and I and the other developers at Agile Lens, we're trying to post more examples of things, because there just aren't enough, especially in Unreal Engine. So if you're trying to figure out like the blueprints and how to get started with a lot of this stuff, like Dante put together a really nice pass-through example that lets you like toggle between the real world and the virtual world in Unreal Engine setup for Meta. And you know, a lot of the tools we're building now, we have a thing called like Agile Lens utility nodes. We want to try to make a lot of these tools available so others don't have to suffer the same way we've suffered to do what in many cases should be relatively straightforward tasks.
Right. I think one other aspect that or like the biggest problem with room scale, or like just the effort of trying to sync the virtual space and the actual space, is always the different coordination. Like, yeah, we know in Unreal has its own virtual coordination, and our headset has its own coordination. And if like in Four Seasons we use OptiTrack, OptiTrack also has its own coordination that they use to just label the position of the space. And so the real problem is always within how to sync every coordination and make sure they are all talking to the same point in the space. It's the biggest pain.
Yeah, but that's the thing too, is Unreal Engine can talk to all these things, sometimes through different protocols, but it's all possible. And sometimes we end up doing things that are incredibly complicated just because we know it's possible. Even if it isn't probable and it's not how something is designed, we get really excited when we realize that something is not outright impossible. Speaking of things like OptiTrack, I've got this fun Iron Man hand here. I'm actually wearing it backwards because I wasn't looking at how I put it on. Someone who we brought on to Agile Lens for the Four Seasons project, his name is Sam Baker. He just released this Indiegogo campaign, or they're shipping now for, what are they called? The frostbite haptic gloves or something like that. And they're awesome. So they were like $200, and it's got these systems in here that actually pull back to make you feel like there's actually tension on things. And also on top of here, I've got the Vive ultimate tracker, which is one way that this can detect where you are in space. But like, this is a new piece of technology that might be able to replace all the stuff we're doing with OptiTrack. Because if you have 5 of these, they all know where they are in a relative position to each other. And so we could put one of these on the heads of 5 different people in a MetaQuest Pro. And in theory, all that data could be shared and it's all inside out. So then, no more need for $300,000 in OptiTrack equipment, maybe. So it's interesting with the Four Seasons project that we're going to have opportunities to keep doing R&D as new software, hardware, et cetera, comes out to kind of stay on the bleeding edge. And hopefully it will inform all the fun, wacky theater projects we do as well.
Yeah. Awesome. I feel like this has been a really great deep dive into what you guys have done here. Obviously a ton has changed. Any final thoughts here before we wrap up the podcast tonight?
All I'd say is tenacity and just reminding people that like you got to be willing to push through when things aren't working, or find workarounds. Like if something actually is giving you a headache for 3 days, jump over to something else. I practice something I like to call productive procrastination, which is I try to have like a list of like 5 to 10 things where it's like, maybe this is the most important thing and this is the least important thing. And I might jump over and procrastinate from the most important thing by doing the least important thing, but it is still something that needs to get done. And then like, no matter what, something useful is happening. And just by making your brain tackle different kinds of problems, which is very easy to do with how widespread Unreal Engine development is, I think it's a good way to solve problems, even if they aren't the problem you need to necessarily be solving at that particular moment. It also really helps to have a good team. So this year, having more people to work with, June and I have been able to expand to a lot of other really talented developers. Even if you're remote, having a good Slack or Discord where you can all, share ideas and bounce off each other and get other eyes on something, that makes a huge difference. But it's all worth it. It's all worth it when you get to say you made something that is super exciting and maybe the first of its kind. Maybe it feels a little bit like we're the early days of ILM or Pixar, where we're like touching all these things, thinking like, maybe this is a thing, maybe it's not. Oh, cool, there's something here. Let's keep going with it. And please, everyone do come see Christmas Carol, Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, live stream all day of pre-recorded content. We'll leave the YouTube chat open if people want to say hi to us or to each other. That's all I have to say. June, how about you?
Yeah, that's probably about what all I want to say as well. But I want to shout out to our other people in the dev team. Thank you, Dante and Josie and Arike and Sarah, and also all the crew members that are not dev team. Sorry if I miss anyone, but Steph and Jackie and Carlos and John, and we also have one new camera person. Sorry, I forgot the name.
John. His name's John.
Oh, I already had John. I thought we have a
John,
third one.
It's John Carl. Oh, there was another one. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
There's one more, but the very fresh one. Yeah, and of course Kevin. Sorry, Kevin and David.
Everyone should go to xmascarolvr.com/credits, or when you come to the show, we do have the credits roll at the end when we take you back to the lobby. So yeah, it's been a really wonderful team. We're really lucky to be among such awesome people. And sorry, Sam Baker, it's called the Bifrost Pulse VR Haptic Club. Definitely want to give that a proper shout out. It's super cool. Everyone should check it out.
Yeah, and please come see the show.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, at that, I'll go ahead and say, hey, if you listen to this point in the podcast,
you're a super fan.
You're a super fan. You can leave us a like or subscribe or any of those things. And happy holidays to those of you who are listening to this in time for that to be relevant. Or, you know what? Whatever holiday it is. Happy holiday! Exclamation point. All right?
Yeah.
And we'll catch you in the new year.
2024. If anyone is going to be in Mesa, Arizona at ASU at the beginning of the year, Kevin and I will be there showing some stuff related to Christmas Carol, and we'll talk more about this at another time. But kind of the entertainment gamified version of all this, which we call Line, which is really meant to be kind of a VR karaoke theater game. So little tease of that, more on that in the future. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your year, and yeah, see you again.
And thank you, June, for joining us.
Thank you so much, June. This was very last minute. I
Thank you.
asked June 10 minutes before we were going to start if she wanted to come talk about like leading the development team on this project. And thank you for being game, June. You're always amazing and a delight. And I feel very lucky that we've been able to work together for a few years now.
Yeah, thank you for the name. It's fun.
All right. Catch everyone later.
Goodbye.